Welcome to the Blonde Runner podcast with Coach Lora Erickson, where she shares her healthy living tips as a running and triathlon coach and mother of 4.
Hello friends, Coach Lora here, and I wanted to talk about tracking your vitals and health metrics today. This is something that I do regularly. I think it is really valuable because it gives you a picture of your overall health. It can also alarm you too if there's something going on that you need to know about. Vitals and metrics, there's a lot out there. I can tell you what I do, and I want to share some of the things that I think are really important to do. And some of the reasons I think that this is good for you, not only does it give you an overall view of your health, but again, it can alarm you to things that aren't right. So I think that's really important. In this, other things that I would suggest making sure you're having done are any pre-screenings. So for women, pap smears and breast exams. For men, the prostate, checking that. And then, colonoscopies, those kind of things that we should be getting as preventive, including like dental care every 6 months and having our eyes checked every year. All these things are good. They can help catch things early if something's going on, because there are some preventable diseases that can be lifestyle modified. For instance, not everybody that gets diabetes is necessarily can it be preventable per se, but if there are signs that something's going on, it can prevent further damage. So I think that's something it's good to get. I always have mine screened just because I'm borderline on that. I've had gestational diabetes, so every year for around my birthday, I have just a general physical done. Even though I'm fairly good shape and in good condition, it gives me an idea of kind of where I'm at and like, is anything changing? That helps. And in time, things do change. Your body changes over time with aging, and we'll talk more about that on this podcast. But I just want to go through another reason that I like to track my vitals is because I'm kind of a perfectionist person. And so for me, it helps me kind of as a win, because my weight's always been pretty good. I have a good blood pressure and those kind of things, but it kind of is like, it's reassuring for me. So some of the things that I track regularly are my resting heart rate. Actually, and there's a lot of tools that you can use for different things. I'm going to suggest some of the ones I use, and if you're listening in, you may know that there's some things that you use that you love. Please send those my way. Please leave a comment or message me or whatever. And so I can learn what those things are. And I like to share things that other people use as well. So my Garmin Forerunner watch actually tracks my heart rate for me. So I can look at, there's just a button I push and I can look at what my heart rate has been overnight. It will also track some of my sleep numbers, which is really valuable. I will say it's very ballparkish, though. I wouldn't say it's 100% accurate, but it's better than nothing, and it is still pretty good. It's like watts on a bike. It bounces around, right? So, but it does give you a general idea you're going up or you're going down, and same for weight. We'll talk about that more. Another thing that I really like that the watch particularly tracks is my VO2 max. So it calculates VO2 max for cycling and for running, and I'm always happy with those numbers usually because it indicates an area of fitness that I'm in, and it relates it to all the other people that are getting metrics done. So it tells me what I am for my percentage for my age, and that's always really good. So it makes me feel good. Like, I'm doing pretty good, especially for my age. And I think that that's valuable information. That just kind of gives me a boost. And it lets me know where I need to work a little harder. If I'm not it's not as high as I wanted it to be, then I'm not making the progress I need in training. Then it helps me and encourages me to do better. Another thing that I like to track is body composition. Now, I do like to talk about body weight as well. And I think it's really important to track those numbers, not necessarily so regularly that you can get discouraged. Some people get really discouraged by a weight number, especially ladies. Sometimes, we're just a little too sensitive about that number. That number is not our value. But the reason that I like to track my weight and things is because it gives me an idea if I'm going the wrong direction. If I haven't eaten as well as I'd like, then obviously my number's going to go up, and I don't like to see that. And so it keeps me on track better. If a lot of people don't like to go to the doctor. They don't like to really see those numbers because it's not what they want and it's discouraging. And I totally understand that, but part of it is being real with yourself. If you're not willing to be real and to understand what's really going on, you're not going to be able to make the changes or difference. And sometimes it's a hard thing to learn. Like, oh, I am up a few pounds, right? I need to work on that. But it's much better to learn that you're a few pounds up than, oh, I'm 10 or 20 or 30 pounds up, right? And it feels very much like a mountain that you have to try to, lose that kind of weight versus a molehill, a little bit of change and trying to self-correct a little sooner. So I think that number is valuable. With weight, I work with a lot of people that are trying to lose weight, which is awesome. But I don't like them to look at just weight. I like them to work more on body composition change. So a lot of times we can be doing everything right, especially when we're just starting out, and that weight number, maybe it changes at first. And then we kind of hit a plateau 6 weeks in and nothing's changing. And often what's happening at that time, even when we're doing the right things, we're eating right, we're weight training, we're doing our cardio, we're doing things right, we're eating in moderation, we're cutting out the junky carbs, the sugary foods, right? But our weight doesn't change. And often what's happening is we're putting on muscle at the same time as we're losing weight. So we're losing muscle, we're losing fat at the same time we're putting on muscle. And so what happens is nothing changes on the scale. And it's discouraging because nothing's changing, but our body is changing, right? Our clothes fit differently. They're fitting looser. And that all needs to be taken into consideration when it comes to body composition change. The only way you really know if your body is changing, you can, of course, is take measurements. That helps a lot. You can go online, look at what measurements you should be taking. Another thing that you might want to consider is, I like the Tanita scale. I will be posting something to my website, or you can always send me a message and I'll give you a link to the scale I like. But it does body composition. You stand on it. It's by electrical impedance. It gives you a ballpark idea of how much fat your body is, the visceral fat, which is the fat around the tissues. Higher visceral fat rating or numbers indicate that you're more at risk for like heart disease and things like that. So, but it gives you those numbers. So it gives you an idea of kind of where you're at. And again, there is a ballpark, because you can weigh yourself and do your body composition on the scale in the morning, and then at night it's a little bit different numbers. But for the most part, over time, it's showing if you're going up or you're going down. But it is really valuable, because if you're starting to lean up and your body weight isn't changing, but your composition, like you dropped a percent body fat. Oh, yeah, okay, I totally am. It gives you another number to indicate how well you're doing. I know with my athletes, one of the first things I do is usually have them do a timed mile at the track. One of the factors, I think, in staying motivated is seeing progress. So when they time themselves at first, and maybe it's not the number they want, maybe they're slower than they want to be, but that's okay, because in a month's time, when they do it again, or every 2 weeks, or whatever frequency you decide, and you're faster, it's motivating. So I like these numbers, even if they don't look good, right? When you're first starting, it's good to have the beginning numbers to say, well, I lost, 50 pounds, right? Because you have to know that initial number. A lot of people don't like to stand on the scale. And maybe you're listening and you're like, well, you don't understand, lady. I'm like 400 pounds and I don't have a scale that will work for me. And I know it is hard. I can't possibly understand completely. I have lost 50 pounds 4 times over with having babies. I don't know what it's like to lose 200 pounds, but I can say, or 300, or whatever you've got to lose. The fact is, it needs to happen. And if you can get those numbers and then see progress or have some accountability to yourself, I know there are scales. If you go in to a facility, like, I don't know, I know when I worked for the hospital, they had a scale that was, we put people on a wheelchair, and then subtract the weight of the wheelchair. And so it's a large scale. So some of these facilities may have that, and they would probably be very accommodating and allow you to weigh yourself, and get help. Don't be afraid. I know it is hard, but even if the best thing to do is prevent it, right? Prevent getting to that point where it's so difficult, but, and keeping ourselves on track sooner, and it's very helpful. I know, like I said, I go every year to the doctor, and, I have been within a pound of my weight every time I've gone in, and that takes some work. I am watching these numbers to help myself, and But I'm really careful because some days I'm a little more sensitive about it than other days. And part of that just is fluctuation with hormones and feelings and things that we deal with as women and men too. And so I know if I'm going to be really crushed, knowing that number is going to be a little higher, what I tell myself is, okay, I'm not going to look because it's just going to get me down. So I'm going to work really hard this week, and I'm going to measure myself on Sunday and see how well I've done this week. Or I'm going to try to get it back to where I think it should be. And so, whatever things that you have to use to motivate yourself, that's why I do the numbers, is to keep myself, just in tune with what my body is doing and to keep me motivated. Other things that I monitor are, I do periodic blood testing, and that's through, let's see what it's called. I'm trying to remember. I'll come back to it because I know I have it written here on my paper, but we'll come back to that and I'll talk about that a little bit more. And then I also monitor my nutrients, which I do track my food, not every single day. And there are some people that do really religiously, which is great. That isn't really my style. What I'll do is periodically track. And I do have, I think humans are kind of habitual. So I have certain foods that I really like to eat. And so if I'm trying to understand like how healthy I did that day, I will actually track it all. I use MyFitnessPal. I think that's a really good option. I know there's some other ones out there. There is a free portion of that, or you could pay for, I never pay for it, but I just do the free version. It gives me enough information. But if you really want to dive into that and really understand what you're eating and how you're doing on nutrients, that's the thing to do. This is one of the reasons that, supplementation can be very valuable. And I know I've talked about those kind of things. So again, I use my Garmin for runner. I use that for resting heart rate, sleep, and it gives me those VO2 max numbers. Also gives me my resting heart rate. If you don't have a watch that does this for you, or an app or things like that, I would suggest you can just take it in the morning. Resting heart rate can be done when you first get up in the morning. Make sure your alarm didn't just go off. Just, relax. And then I usually just do the pulse in the neck with the 2 fingers. You don't want to use the thumb. It has its own pulse, but use those 2 fingers and then just count for a minute. That would be your resting heart rate. A good resting heart rate is usually between 60 and 100. I would say closer to 60. Mine's fairly low. Mine's between 38 and 42, which is pretty low. And the reason why is because I'm an endurance athlete. And so my heart is strong. And so it pumps that blood a little easier. So it doesn't need as many beats. But if you can work to lowering that number, maybe not as low, like mine is fairly low. It's normal for me, but I wouldn't say that's normal for everyone. So, but how do you know if it is normal for you if you don't even know that number? So I would say give it a shot, try it, and just track it. I track it every week. I see it every day on my watch, so that's really nice. But I usually write down those numbers every week, so I'm able to see, oftentimes if you see that it's elevated, that could indicate that you're really stressed. Obviously, that affects cortisol and all these other hormones, and it's not good to stay stressed all the time. So maybe you need to do some more meditation or relaxation, or it's indicating you might be getting sick. You might have a virus or something that you just haven't seen the impact yet. Temperature is another one. I don't monitor my temperature. However, that would be really easy to do. I know if there are fluctuations in temperature, that can also indicate that you're getting sick. So that's a vital. Some people do. That's great. Respiratory rate is another one some people do. That would not be hard to check while you're doing your resting heart rate. Basically, you just count how many breaths you take a minute. Average is 12 to 18. One of the other indicators I really like to use is oxygen saturation. I use the pulse oximeter, and it's the thing you put on your finger. If you've ever been to hospital, they put the little thing on your finger, and then they'll tell you how much oxygen you're getting. Between 95 and 100% is obviously good numbers. If it's lower, a lot of people with COVID, they were having some pretty low numbers. It's a bad sign. Obviously, you're not getting the air that you need, or the oxygen that you need. One of the things I like to use that for So I have the little one that goes on my finger, and is when I do meditation. I like to see if I can get that number up to 100%. It's tough. It's tough to get it there, but when I'm taking deep breaths, and I think it's really good to just take the time to have some deep breathing. It's not only meditative, but you're really oxygenating your blood for a good 10 minutes, like really getting the number up. And so I kind of like to do that. That's kind of fun for me. Again, like I do the blood testing. Let me see if it's called Inside Tracker. I don't know why I couldn't remember that, but if you use the code RUNBLONDE, you can get a discount, and I do have a link for that, but that's 25% off. And what's really cool about the blood testing is they look at all kind of different factors. So they do look at your nutrient levels, and they can give you like cholesterol and iron, everything that you would need. And they have different tests that you can order. This is something that you can do. They'll send you stuff. You can do it, or you can go somewhere and have it done, and they'll, put an order in. But they have an app, and you can check, numbers, and you can, they have suggestions on when to retest. But it could be really valuable. It's just kind of fun to see. I don't know. I've always been interested in like, what is the body doing? Where are my numbers? Why or am I here? And what can I do to improve? So that Inside Tracker is kind of a cool option for you with blood tests. They also do another one where you can find out your history, your like who you're related to. That's really, really cool too. I haven't done that one yet, but that's on my list. Another device that I like to use is called Lumen. That is a little device that I breathe into, and then it measures my expelled air and determines what I'm using at that time. Like, am I using sugar? Am I using fat? It basically tracks what your metabolism is doing. And so it's kind of interesting. The more, obviously, the better I eat, and the more I'm burning fat too. And so that kind of helps me establish what I'm having for breakfast. If I'm burning, a lot of carbohydrate, then I could have, obviously I'm burning carbohydrate at that time, but it just changes how I will fuel a workout. So I do have more information on that on my website, so you can check that out. But that is a really cool tool. Just all these little things. When we used to test our metabolism, we had to hook up to a major thing and lay there for hours. Now it literally takes me 10 seconds, and I hold my breath, then I expel. It's like less than a minute, and I can know what my numbers are and where my metabolism is at. And it talks to, it does go into a lot of the educational components of that app. And then you're trying to gain more metabolic flexibility is what it's called. But check that out if you haven't learned about metabolic flexibility. So I think that's really valuable. Another thing, so I did talk about MyFitnessPal. Another thing that I really like is to keep a training log. So I use Training Peaks for that with all my athletes. That is a great online tool. They also have an app. But that way you're able to really see what you're really doing. I think a lot of people think, yeah, I exercise really good. But when you actually track it and you see what you're doing, you can also measure your progress and see if you're racing really well, obviously you can look at your training and see what you did. I think it's nice to keep a record. This also helps me fine-tune my nutrition plan for my races. It just gives me a place to talk about how I'm doing there. I like to keep what's called a gratitude journal and also a success journal, and we'll probably talk more about that on this podcast. But I like to record the things that I'm doing well in training, the things I need to work on, the goals that I'm working towards. Any kind of tracking of progress usually yields more progress. So that's why I like to keep numbers. That's why I, like to look at all these things to see what I can do to improve it. But I think it is valuable not to get overly concerned about some of these things. And if obviously there's a concern, a number doesn't look right, then you need to take note. And the other thing I wanted to say is there are regular numbers for you. So body mass index is another often utilized, I don't know if you'd call it a vital or metric number that it relates to your health. Basically, it takes your age and your gender and your height and your your weight and all of that into consideration, and basically gives you a number. But I will say there are people that are super, super fit that look like they're overweight or obese on that BMI scale. And part of it's just because they have so much muscle for their height. Like, I think if Arnold Schwarzenegger, I think I heard something about this when he did it, he was like considered extremely obese or something. And so it has to be relative. Obviously, that doesn't make sense, right? But he's super thick. And I wouldn't say a lot of people have that kind of muscle mass. But you do have to consider build, and I think that's important. And your own individuality. For instance, when I said my resting heart rate is low, I have a 38 to 42. I had neck surgery in college. I had a cyst removed. It was kind of blocking my airway. Had that removed, and that's when I realized I never really tracked my numbers so much then, but as I do now. But that's everybody who's coming in, looking at my heart rate. They couldn't believe it. They couldn't imagine someone not sick with that low of a heart rate. And that's when I realized I had that. But that was normal for me. Again, that may not be normal for you. Another thing I like to tell people is, a lot of people that I train for running races and things, we use a lot of if you ever use any of the formulated plans, sometimes they'll figure out what you need to do at the track based on, previous results of your races, which may not actually be what you're capable of. It may be just what you've done because you didn't believe in anything more, or you hadn't done the right kind of training. And so I'd be careful with some of these generalized numbers because they may not work for you. For instance, for me, my average heart rate for half marathon is between 182 and 185. Like, I keep my heart rate that high for over an hour and a half in a half marathon. That's normal for me. That isn't normal for everyone else. There are some people that I've worked with that when they get in the 160s, they feel like they're going to pass out. And that's normal for them. So when you use some of these generalized numbers or charts, it may not be ideal for you. So I think this is when you track these numbers and you understand your own numbers. The reason I know those numbers, and I'm not alarmed when my watch says, oh, I'm at 180 in the race or 185. I know I can hold that. I've done it before. So it gives me an indication that, I'm okay with where for me. So I think these numbers are valuable for you to understand yourself and what is normal for you. Same with blood pressure. That's another good metric that I do quite often. My husband takes his a lot, so I just end up taking mine too. And it's interesting. I've always had pretty good numbers there. But 120 over 80 is the normal, but you need to find out what your normal is. And obviously, sometimes that can be something you maybe have to take medication for, or you have to change your lifestyle. I do notice one of the things he says, and I've heard this from others, is when he does exercise, his blood pressure is much better. Like for many days. Like it has a lasting impact. Far more than medication. I know some people need the medication as well. He takes his when he needs it, but that's something to consider. Exercise does make a big impact in terms of all these health numbers and metrics and things. But obviously keeping it in check. There are people that go overboard on exercise too. So it's just valuable to find what your normal is, and these are good things to take. So I highly encourage you to maybe a few of these numbers. You don't maybe have to take quite as many as I like to take, but find a way to record it and document. I know if you have that accountability, even with just the basic weight, maybe go with what you have now, and then over time, just seeing what direction you're heading. Is it the right direction? The direction you want to head, and create some more accountability for yourself. So hopefully that was helpful for you. Until next time, live well. Thank you for joining me for this episode of the Healthy Living Podcast. Be sure and check the show notes for resources or links that we mentioned in the show. You can also find them on my website at blonderunner.com. BLONDERUNNER.com. You can also find me on Instagram at theblonderunner with an E and Coach Lora Erickson, and that's Lora. Before you forget, I hope that you will follow this podcast and like it so you don't miss an episode. Also, it really helps if you leave a review so other people can find it, and share it with your friends. Until next time, live well.